After marrying in February 1936, Helen and Palmer moved to Seattle to seek their fortune and build a life together. Palmer had visited Seattle as a teen by riding the rails and playing music in saloons. He insisted he never wanted a farm, so they drove their old Oakland, packed to the gills, camping along the way, to their new life starting in Seattle.
Anyway, we had just an old Oakland. We drove out there that time, and we drove right into downtown Seattle on the steepest streets there was, and with no brakes. And we stayed at the Lincoln Hotel because they had rooms with little kitchenettes in them, and that was between 2nd and 3rd Avenue in Seattle. And that's where we stayed first, and we couldn't afford to keep staying in a hotel because Palmer didn't really have a job. He tried this and that, so one thing led to another, and he finally got a job at the Marine Hospital. He made $100 a month, and Palmer was steward. He bought all the food for the kitchen for that Marine Hospital, which was a pretty good job.
We moved from there to Capitol Hill on Boylston and rented an apartment there. And it was a nice neighborhood, and by that time I'm expecting Carol. And it was so nice. The druggist's wife, the grocery store's wife, everybody living around there, there were about 25 women got together and had a baby shower for me. And most of them had never ever met me. So we got all the baby clothes we possibly could have. And so we considered ourselves very lucky.
Well, we lived up on Boylston in an apartment there when she was born, and she was a preemie.
6.5 weeks early.
So I couldn't even give her a bath. All I had to do was wash her body with oil. But she was in the funniest incubator when she was born. It was a big canvas thing with lights in it and everything. And they had her head down. And I went in to look at her, and of course I fainted. They had to get me back to bed. But I was in the hospital 3 weeks, I think, when she was born.
After we left there, Annie Jo and Bergie had come out, and we figured we could get a big enough place so we could live together. And then Eva came out, and Jean and she, it was her husband, wanted to go in. So we got a big place to go. 3 couples could live there. And of course we had Carol as a baby then. And Eva got a job working for Dags. And then of course now she's pregnant. And she didn't want to work, wasn't feeling too good. So Palmer and Carol and I moved out there and took over her job and worked for the Dags. She and he both worked. And they had a financial company where they sold stocks and bonds and stuff like that. And so they had a boy and a girl at home, and so I took care of them, cooked for them, and cleaned the whole house. I had a big house in Laurelhurst, and so we worked for them for quite a long time until Palmer didn't like living in we had a 1-room apartment in their house with a bed and everything. But of course we could eat out in the dining room or the kitchen. And so I cooked for us too, as well as the kids. Bergie and my husband went out, and instead of a place close to work, or wouldn't cost them a fortune to drive, they went all the way to Alderwood and bought a brand new 2-bedroom house on a piece of ground. It was over an acre. And it had a great big chicken coop. It was next to a farm that raised chickens. So here we are. We're going to have raise chickens and get eggs and sell the eggs and make extra money. And these are batteries that we put the chicken in. They were automatically fed and watered, right in front of each cage. They were left in a cage. And we got a police dog there, and it watched Carol like a hawk. Carol would head for the road, that dog and grab her by the seat of the pants and pull her all the way up the house. And she's screaming the whole time. But she wouldn't let her get away from the house. She made her stay right there.
But we made the mistake of moving to Alderwood, a brand new little 2-bedroom house out there. And Bergie and us together. And Annie Jo, though, worked for Dr. Lowe, Ralph Lowe. So she only came out there on weekends. The gas bill was half of Palmer's wages. We decided, well, this is ridiculous. We couldn't live out there. And of course we hadn't bought a washing machine. I washed all the sheets, everything by hand. Didn't have drapes. And that's when I said, well, I'm going to get a job and get some work so at least I get some drapes. And one night we were going down to Echo Lake to go swimming, and I had my bathing suit on, my dress over it. And I said, I think I'll stop at Colgrove's and apply for a job. Palmer says, you got to do it right now or forget it. You're not going to work. He pulled in there, and I felt terrible because I wasn't dressed to go be interviewed. And Mr. Colgrove's Aunt Lucia was there. And so I talked to her, and Mr. Colgrove says, well, come back next Saturday. And I went back in there on Saturday. Of course, I dressed up and looked pretty good. And there was another girl there applying for the job. And Aunt Lucia said, no, this is the one that was here first, and you should give her a chance first. So I went to work just Sundays, 1 day a week, 25 cents an hour. And of course, Mr. Colgrove liked me, and I was a worker. I worked hard. I didn't mind scrubbing past pens. We weren't doing anything else. I made sure all the salt and pepper shakers were full and sugar at the table, and I'd help make pies. I'd do anything, because I worked all the time. So anyway, the girl said, well, you got to get us a raise, because we know you're going to get a raise. So then Mr. Colgrove called me in, and he said, no, I don't want you to tell anybody else. But if you keep working, I'm going to give you $1 an hour. That was a lot of money. And I said, well, the rest of the employees feel they should have a raise. They've been here a while now, and you're only giving them 25 cents. All right, I'll give them 35 cents an hour, but don't you dare tell anybody I'm giving you $1 an hour. And so that's what I did, and that's where we got. And I would put my check into the fund, but my tips, I put them in a savings account in the bank. That was my earned money that I felt I didn't have to contribute to our household with. So, and I got that tip money up to $2,500. So tips, the girls made over $100 a week in tips, 120 as their average, because we had an exclusive dinner club. There were only 5 restaurants in Seattle at that time that were considered top restaurants, and Mr. Colgrove's was one of them.
Palmer and Bergie decided that they'd build a house and maybe we could avoid paying rent. And so they didn't have any money, but I had been working for Mr. Colgrove on Sundays, just Sundays. That's all Palmer would let me work. So I kept putting money away in the bank. So I had $2,500 in the bank. So when they wanted to buy this lot, guess who had the money to buy it? So we bought it, and they built this house and garden home. And then I said, it's too small, there's no way we could move into that. And so we decided to sell it and build something else, bigger. And so the people that bought it had a lot on Lake Serene. We gave them $750 for that lot, and that bought the house from us. And then we sold the lot and got money there, so we started building houses. And we built lots and lots of houses, and I paid for all the bills and did all the bookwork and did everything I could to help. And we did quite well on it. Then we bought old houses, put in new bathrooms and new kitchens and painted it inside and out and landscaped the yard. And we'd end up with $4,000 to $6,000 profit when we sold it, because we fixed it up so nice that it looked like it was new house. And then after that we started building more, bigger houses. And every time we'd move in one, Palmer'd have a sale, it'd be a nice big profit, until we'd sell it. Carol moved 14 times before she got to the second grade. So you know we were doing real well. Then we started the real estate office at Square Deal Realty, and Palmer built the office building. There were 5 offices and parking in back, and Andy and he were going to be partners. He was the youngest broker in the state of Washington. He was 21 years old, and I have a nice article that was in the paper about him. And then we built, can't remember how many apartments it was, 8, 10, 12, up behind the office on a lot there. And those apartments are still being used and rented out. And the place looks just the same as it did 50 years ago.
One of the things that's of interest is that Palmer built the first strip mall in Seattle, and it was out on Aurora, close to the 90th, and it was 5 stores with off-street parking right in front. Well, that became very popular, and now we have that all over. Cities everywhere, but we were the first ones to do that in Seattle.
That's Carol and I at Densmore, and I was buying clothes from Oregon Woolen Mills in Salt Lake City, and this outfit I ordered is a cape and a dress, or a suit. I think it's a suit and a cape, and it was very, very stylish looking. Anyway, I had to make Carol a cape, and I sold all of Carol's clothes until she was 9 years old. When we were at the restaurant, I didn't sew for her. I bought everything at the merry-go-round shop, and one day I saw a dress I wanted for her. It was $30, and all I had was $28, and we paid cash for everything. And Grandma says, "I'm not going to let you buy that for $30. And I said, "Well, I didn't bring enough money with me, and I'll have them laid away, and I'll come and get it later." And so she gave me the $2 so that I could buy the dress. But they were just darling dresses.
Palmer was not able to fight in World War II since he was Class 4F, not acceptable for military service due to illness from bleeding ulcers that started at age 17. In 1943, when Carol was 7, on doctor's orders they moved to Corpus Christi, Texas for Palmer's health.
We bought a brick home right near Green Lake, and the war was on, and Palmer was 4F, so he could not go in, and the doctor told him that he had quit what he was doing. He was selling real estate and building, and he said, "You've got to quit all that, otherwise you're not going to be alive a year from now." So that's when we sold our house, and we had contracts coming in that paid us enough so we could live without working. And so the man that was working for us talked us into going to Corpus Christi. He used to live there, and he told how wonderful it was. So we went to Corpus Christi, and we bought a house there, completely furnished down to the dishes, in the most exclusive area in Corpus Christi. Then we decided to buy another house and fix it up and sell it. And things weren't going well in Seattle, and people weren't making payments to us, and we needed that to live on. So Palmer decided to go back up and see what had to be done. But I was going to stay there till I sold the 2 houses and Carol finished the school year out. So Ruby, as Annie Jo's sister, came down to be with me while all this transpired. And then I injured myself and got a hernia, so I had to go to North Dakota to have Palmer's folks and Esther take care of Carol for me while I went into the hospital for 22 days. And I should not have gotten out of bed as quick as I did or did the things I did. So I had a very bad year. And I went back to Seattle, and Mom had bought another house there and was remodeling it. It had a full apartment in the basement so we could live down there while he finished the upstairs. And it was like living in a fishbowl. It was windows all around it, between 99th and 100th, right next to Blue Ridge on 24th, a half a block from the water. It was while we were in the house there at North Shore that Mr. Kogel decided he should retire because he was over 75. He went down to the real estate office and was talking to Palmer about, do you want to get a listing on the restaurant? You can run an ad and I'll give you an exclusive listing. And Palmer asked him how much he wanted and everything, and he come home, and so that's how come we bought the restaurant. We sold our house and got $5,000 for the house, and so we made that as a down payment. So we bought 2 acres of ground where there was a house and the restaurant. And of course this is during the war years, and so business didn't matter if I did it right or wrong. I did nothing but make money. And Carol remembers this, that we had lots and lots of money when we first started. We had the restaurant. And I had made to order dresses, Palmer had made to order suits, and we had a new car every year, and lived high on the hog.
I was one of the best restaurants around Seattle at that time. And so then I finally had to hire Jackie to be a hostess, because all I did was talk to people. I made the rounds, and I knew everybody in the Highlands, everybody in Woodway. And well, one person was Iro Beckett, who owned the Edmund Mini Hotel, and he was president of the State Liquor Board. And they came every Thursday night for dinner. And one Thursday I missed. He said, Helen, I could go to my own restaurant and eat. We come out here just to talk to you. And if you're not going to come and talk to us, we're going to quit coming. So I had to make it a point. There were a lot of them that came every week, and I had to go talk to all of them. That's all they wanted to do was listen to me talk. And anyway, while we had this restaurant, then Diane was born. And she was a little rascal. Cuter than a bug's ear, and I dressed her fit to kill. I got all her clothes at the Miracle Run shop. But she wanted to be in the middle of everything. And I'd catch her with her little menu pad, pencil, and she's maybe 2.5 years old, she's gonna take orders. And this one time, I'll never forget this man, he was alone, and he was come all the time to eat there, and she wanted to take his order. And he said, well, I don't think you could get what I have to have. I want baby food beans. They're nothing but mush. And she said, well, I think we could do that. And she came out to the kitchen, and Elizabeth was our chef at that time, and she said, no way, we don't have baby food here. Go back and tell him he can't have it. Diane never got over that. And Saturday morning, here she is out there taking the order from Clouds, well, the Edmonds Tribune. And she was sneaking stuff all the time, doing stuff. And we had a fish pond right out by the back door. And of course, I had her dressed up fit to kill. And what did she do? Go out there and walk into that fish pool. It was about 2 feet deep. And I come out and caught her, and here she was playing in the fish pool. And I had to take her up and change all her clothes, and I made her stay in bed. Well, Lucille decided that she didn't want to cook anymore. She was our cook. And so Rodney Lovedahl came out to see us from North Dakota. And he was only 19 at the time, but he said, you know, I think I could handle it. How about giving me a chance at being the chef? He had to wear his white cap and everything, and he did a real good job. And of course, he lived up at the house. We had a spare room that he slept in, but he always babysat Carol and Diane. And Palmer and I were always on the go. Diane and Rodney were always into something. And he was always getting her to perform for the customers. She took tap dancing lessons, so she'd be out there tap dancing for him and singing the songs, anything to entertain him. But Rodney used to entertain everybody for at least 2 hours, telling about the things that she pulled and did. And she said, I don't want to hear any more about when I was a kid and I was a brat. She said, I'm sick and tired of hearing all those stories. But anyway, she kept everybody entertained, that was for sure.
Palmer always wanted to have the latest technology, So Helen remembers how they had one of the first televisions of any of their friends.
Everybody had come to our house because we had TV and nobody else had one. And especially the wrestling nights, because they just really enjoyed that. And then 7 years after we bought our black and white set, colored TV came in. And of course we had to have one. And that same thing then, people come to our house to watch colored television. We got the, at that time we paid $1,000 for our first colored TV. There was only one show that came in color, and that was Bonanza. Otherwise the rest were all black and white. And we didn't have them continue shows that would just be spasmodic, that we would have shows during the day, but we had news in the evening, and would have evening programs, but it always went off at midnight.
While we were living there at the restaurant, we had open house every Wednesday, and everybody knew we were home. We always had food and snacks and drinks and music. And Harry Einmo played the clarinet, and Palmer played the guitar, and we always had a jam session. And this went on all the years we were there. They finally had to switch to Friday night because Carol didn't get any sleep. It was too noisy. And so every Friday night was open house. And Neil LeBang, who played for Lawrence Welk, was one guy that used to come on Friday nights. Lloyd Lindroth, who was a jazz harpist, very famous in Las Vegas and LA. He used to come there at our house. And sometimes there'd be only 2 people, sometimes there'd be 20. And they all knew that we had open house on Friday nights. And Jimmy Alexander was one that played with Palmer. Dr. Parsley was another one that played with him. They all thought they were pretty good. But it was a lot of fun.
Helen has also witnessed almost the entire history of telephones.
In my early childhood, I lived with my grandmother, and she just didn't feel she could afford to have a phone. And at that time, you never dialed anybody. You called operator and told her you wanted to talk to so-and-so. And then she'd check it and see if the line was clearer, because they were party lines. And a lot of people would be talking on the same line. And so you'd have to get sure that the line was clear, and she'd dial you in, and you could talk to people. And it had to be in the early 50s when we got to dial phones.
Instead of hearing the operator's familiar "number please," you'll hear the dial tone. Then, dial the first 2 letters of the central office name. W, O. And the 5 numerals which make up the complete number. 4, 9.
And then we dialed them. And that we had that for many, many years, and where we could dial direct, not go through an operator. So all the women that worked as operators lost their positions because it all became automatic. And then from dial phones, we went to super punch button phones, where we punched the buttons and dialed our numbers ourselves. We do them. And at first we only had 3 phone numbers. And it got so we had to put an area code and then the phone number, because there were so many phones. And of course now it's almost unreal. Everybody has a phone, has a cell phone or wireless phone of some kind. So they carry it with them wherever they go, and they don't need anybody to help them dial. It's a big, big change.
Helen has always stayed busy, sometimes too busy, especially where the restaurant was concerned.
We were living there at the restaurant. Then we built apartment buildings on the acre north. We had it subdivided. Then we decided to build an office down there, and so Andy got Square Deal Realty, and Palmer opened his own office, Robinwood Realty. And I did all the books for the real estate office and the restaurant, all the contracts we had. And Palmer continued building. He got into mostly apartments then. He built apartment buildings. And we built West Shore Center, which is 3 office buildings on Lake Union with both mortgage in front of it.
Palmer was getting a little disgusted because I'm down there every single night. And he's worked at the real estate office all day. He comes home and he wants me up at the house. And he said, we're gonna get rid of that restaurant. You just live down there. And so he decided that he was gonna sell it. And we kept 1 acre with the real estate office and the apartments, and then the house and the restaurant was 1 acre. It was a nice house. We lived in it all the time we were there. So we traded the restaurant to Lloyd Martin. Palmer was running the real estate office out there at the Robwood Realty. And he had quite a few people working for him, but I did all the books. And I would take I had a real estate license too, and I would take the new salesman out, show them how to cold solicit. And the first month they always made at least $3,000 because I showed them how to go out and get good listings. And I know Bobby Scott, when I took him out, we're knocking at doors and getting listings and stuff. And he said, you know, I'm getting tired. I think it's time we quit. And I said, 1 more house and then we'll quit. Went to that house and here there were raw bones, great big bones, and 3 police dogs in the front yard. It was all fenced. And Bobby Scott says, I'm not going in there. Look what happened to the last real estate salesman that was there. Bones all over the place. But he did real good. That first month he made $3,000 in sales. The next month I didn't take him out. He had to go by himself. Well, he only made $2,000. And the next month he sat in the office most of the time. He only made $1,000. And I said, if you got a good listing, you got a sale. If you don't have a good listing, you don't have a sale. So it's up to you. If you want to make sales, you've got to go out and knock on doors and find good listings.
After we left the restaurant, we moved into the bench house, and it was there that Monty was born.
And so Palmer got his boy after 17 years, from Carol to Monty was 17 years. And I said, well, when it comes to naming, I guess you could have your Monty finally. After waiting 17 years, you could have your Monty. So then they put names in a hat and drew his middle name, and that's Lee, Monty Lee.
He was just a few months old. We moved out to the duplex for 2 months. Then we moved into a small house near the real estate office, and we were supposed to just stay there 9 months and then move somewhere else. When it got to be a little bit longer, we bought a house at Linwood. And we were only going to stay there a year, and Palmer said he would build it. It's a nice house. Well, it was 4 years that we lived there, and I went out and bought a new dishwasher to put in because I had a big kitchen and plenty of room with the dishwasher. And he says, you're not putting that in this house. And I said, well, I'm not. I don't have room for it in the garage. The garage is packed. Well, he said, I guess I'm going to have to build you a house with a dishwasher. So that's how come we built in Woodway.
We had bought this property in Woodway, and that was before Monty was born even, we bought it. Dave Whitcomb would come in Palmer and he'd go to lunch, and he said, you know, I've got your name on a piece of property down there and I'm not selling it to anybody else. And this is 5 years before Woodway was incorporated even. They were just kind of laying it out. Well, by that time we had 4 horses. And we were boarding them out, paying for somebody to take care of them and feed them. And so I said, well, you know, we've got that property there, Woodway, why don't we clear it and put the horses down there? And Diane wants a horse so bad, she was 10 years old. And I said, she could feed them, and I'll take her down there and she could feed them and she could groom them if we need to be groomed. And by that time, Palmer had joined the King County Posse, so we had to have a Palomino. And he went way to Spokane to get a Palomino. That was Diablo. And anyway, we built the barn, I guess, first. Then we started on the house. And Andy and Catherine came over, so we weren't here when they were pouring the foundation and everything, and they goofed. They didn't read the blueprint right. And so that family room got 2 feet bigger than it should have been. but it was kind of late then, and the bed had already set up and everything, they were framing it and everything, so. But that's how come we got a big living room and a big family room.
And now that was 47 years ago, this last Thanksgiving, that we moved in there. The oven wasn't connected, the cupboards weren't finished, but we moved in anyway, and
But it's worked out just beautifully for us. It's a party house and it's been that. And we've thoroughly enjoyed living here, and I don't want to move out. I think it was meant to be that I just stay here.
Palmer was very musical throughout his life without any formal teaching, and Helen regretted refusing music lessons in Minnesota, so they wanted their children to have the benefit of musical education.
we didn't have a piano when we first moved out to Edmonds and I run the restaurant. So Carol took violin lessons, and Professor Wing would come out the house and give her lessons. Well, then we got a piano, so we let her drop the violin and take piano lessons. Well, then we let her quit, which we shouldn't have, but we did. Well, Diane and Monty both wanted to take piano lessons. And I said, well, if you start, you cannot quit, so be sure when you start that you keep on taking lessons. Oh, but no problem at all. Well, they both wanted to quit, but I said, no, you made a deal that if you got piano lessons, you would not quit. So they were not allowed to quit until they graduated from high school. Of course, they both took saxophone lessons and clarinet lessons and guitar lessons and learned to play different string instruments.
The King County Sheriff's Posse was a large part of Helen's family life for quite a while.
One of the highlights of our life that Diane and Monty really enjoyed also was the King County Posse. And how we became involved in that, Palmer and I were downtown Seattle one day, and Palmer always wore a white Stetson hat. And this fellow stopped and asked Palmer, he said, do you like horses? And Palmer said, yes, I have one horse now. And he said, well, it wouldn't cost you any more to have a Palomino, would it, than the horse you have? And he said, we're looking for new members for the King County Mounted Police. Would you like to come out on Tuesday night when they have their drill and see if you would be interested? So that began our involvement with the posse. And Palmer immediately bought a trailer, had a trailer made, went out and bought a Palomino horse, got all his uniforms, got a work saddle and a silver saddle. So he was all set to go with the King County Posse. And we did a lot of traveling to different towns and in parades at that time. The men were professional people that could take time off from their law firm or their doctor's office or whatever they were involved in. They had owned their own business. So we did a lot of traveling around when Diane and Monty were small. And we always were in Portland for the Rose Parade on Monty's birthday. So the posse always had a birthday party for him. No kids, but the posse had a party for Monty every year.
But one time we're up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and we were out for dinner, and Monty was sitting next to Bob Baylor. And I think Bob Baylor thought it was funny. I didn't think it was. But he said, look, Monty, they've got horseradish. And Monty said, what's that? Oh, you got to taste it. It's so good. And Bob Baylor gets a whole teaspoon of it and throws it into Monty's mouth, and he about choked to death. He coughed and spit and coughed and coughed. He never liked Bob Baylor after that, and I don't blame him one bit.
Well, come time when we first joined, Carol was going to college. And so they said they needed a princess to represent Greater Seattle at the Ellensburg Rodeo. Was there any reason why Carol couldn't be the princess for that year? Did she ride? Yes. And so that's the way they got involved. And she was princess. And a few years later, Diane's old enough now to be a princess. And they voted her in. And it so happened at the Rose Parade in Portland, they put her out in the front. It was a televised, here it shows Diane with her blonde hair and powder blue suit, Palomino with its white mane and tail, and it was very striking. So she was on TV a great deal because she went all over the state. We had one of the biggest years we ever had the year that Diane was princess. Palmer got so he couldn't load his silver saddle. Of course, they said, oh, well, they would do it for him. But he still took care of the music, but he quit riding. And by this time, I think we had moved to Woodway because there was 3 acres of land there, plenty of room for the horses. And we had 4 horses for a while. Anyway, Diane's horse was a mare, so we bred her to a stallion that we had, who was Palomino, and she threw off a Palomino horse.
Helen and Palmer allowed their son Monty the freedom to teach himself about machinery by trial and error.
Palmer wanted Monty to be able to learn about machinery. And so he let Monty and his friends, all they wanted to do was tear machinery apart. And anything we'd give them, let them tear it apart and then try to put it back together again. We never dreamt that he got that good. We were on a trip and we came back. We had a Cadillac, just a new one, a year old, and he had taken the engine out of it and just did everything to it and put it back together again. Palmer was sure it would never run. It run just beautifully. But that's how Monty learned about machinery, was he was allowed to take anything we had apart and then try to put it back together again. It's a real good experience for him.
The Hajo Corporation seemed like a good investment for the family, but it caused a lot of work and stress for Helen.
Palmer started working for Northwest Corporation, and Maury Treadwell was president, and got invested in different things. Well, one of the things that came into the office was that this survey company in New York City wanted to sell the 17 apartment buildings and 18 lots in Seattle. And the reason they were going to sell them was because they were the bonding company for Mr. Johnson and Mr. Haber, who were builders. Well, Haber and Johnson were turning in false claims. They were arrested, both of them, and Haber got so shook up about it, and he was quite well known in Seattle, and he thought it was going to be so bad that he shot himself. Well, Johnson figured he was going to fight it out. If he had to go to jail, he'd go to jail, but he wasn't going to give in like Haber did. Well, bonding company repossessed all their property. So now they're going to sell this to try to recoup some of their money. And Mr. Treadwell and Palmer worked out a plan where we bought it and he bought it, but then we gave him a note where that we would buy his share after so many years and for so much money. And that's how we ended up with Hajo, Haber Johnson, Hajo. And so I took over management of 17 buildings. And it was right after the World's Fair, which is 1962. Things went to pot in Seattle. We had building after building completely empty. And Palmer was sick in the hospital for months at a time. And I had Diane and Monty at home. Of course, they were in school, but I worked every day downtown at one of the buildings. And it was getting almost more than I could handle. And this one young man come looking at an apartment. He was going to be a Catholic priest and decided that wasn't his cup of tea. So he was going to do something else. He was a real energetic, good-looking young man. And I got the bright idea that I would hire him to be there and show the apartments and rent them so I didn't have to run to all the buildings. So we did this. And we'd get a building rented enough so that it paid the expenses and the mortgage payments. He moved on to the next building. And pretty soon he had our buildings all full again. And this was my guiding angel, I call it, that came and helped me out until I was able to handle them all. And then eventually we sold off a lot of them because it was almost too much for me to maintain the home in Woodway and the family and all the things that went on in our life. And then Palmer was getting sicker and sicker all the time, and so he decided I couldn't handle it all. And finally, I had to put my foot down and tell him, you know, I got to have something to keep me out of mischief. And I was able to salvage the duplexes at Linwood, Robinwood property, Robin Apartments and Office, and also the Finney Apartments. And thank goodness that I was able to salvage them, because that's where I have made my money and been able to help the kids and grandkids and just have a good time.
Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love.